You have been muted. Your microphone has been turned on. The floor mode is on. To request the floor, enter star, then pound.
Hey everybody, this is Sierra Royster from April. We are going to go ahead and get started in about 2 minutes. So if you can just give us a little bit of time, we are going to go ahead and get started. Let some more people jump on. And thanks for joining us. Everybody, this is Sierra. We're going to give it about 1 more minute, and then we will get started. But for the last people to jump on. Thanks. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I am Sierra Royster. I am the April's Youth Program Coordinator. I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us in today's call. Today is the April Youth Talk Series, and we're going to be covering youth at the SILC table and more. Today's call will be a webinar system, or you can follow along with the PowerPoint materials that were sent to you with the call-in information. If you run into any issues throughout the call, please let me know in the chat box if you can do that, or you can also email me, and that is april-sierra, SIERRA, at att.net, N-E-T. And I'll also drop that in the chat box for everybody as well. If you happen to get disconnected, please remember the phone number is 1-800-832-0736. And the meeting room number is 346-1864. I will drop that in the chat box too, so you can follow along if anything does happen. As we get started, my apologies about some of the formatting has changed from this morning. But I do want to say, just to let you know, everybody is muted right now and will be muted throughout the call, but if you have questions, you can press *# to enter that by phone. There's also, if you're on the webinar platform, there is a person at the top of the screen with their hand raised. If you press that, that lets me know that you have a question as well. Or you can just drop your question right in the chat box. And there's my email and phone number if you have any other issues throughout the call. We do encourage you to ask questions, share comments. We will have breaks throughout the presentation to be able to do that. We will be hearing today from Melissa and Zach on how to get more youth engaged and participating in a vital part on your SILC, but this can also be replicated to your board and councils that youth may be on as well outside of just the SILC council. Throughout the presentation, like I said, we will stop for question and answer. So please feel free to jump in whenever you would like in the chat box, and we can try to address those as we see them. This call is brought to you through the April Youth Peer-to-Peer Mentoring Program. It is funded from the Independent Living Research Utilization, ILRU. The Youth Peer-to-Peer Program allows an organization such as a SIL or a SILC to have a youth peer-to-peer mentor come to their organization to conduct a 2-day in-person training. This is an opportunity for the organization to learn, plan, create ideas and goals for a new or existing program that they may want to expand. This can be training in a certain topic, such as today's topic, or a general overview of youth programming and youth involvement. The organization will then have support from that mentor for up to a year after. They will also receive collected materials, activities, tips, experience, practices, and more in a varying topics as it concerns youth and young adults. So a little bit more about the peer-to-peer program, and I want to go ahead and apologize. The formatting has changed even from when I was on just an hour ago. So please, if it's bothering you too much, check out the handouts that was sent separately as an attachment in the original email. If you need that, I can send that again. But we cover many different topics: recruitment, retention, transportation, disability history and awareness, sexuality and relationships, intellectual disability inclusion programs, facilitation techniques, engagement with youth with disabilities, and many more areas. So if you're interested in that, please contact me, and we'll give you some more information at the end. But like I said, Melissa and Zach are doing 2 great things in 2 different parts of our country with young people in SILCs and in more areas. So we're so great to have them with us today. And I will go ahead and kick it over to you guys.
Thank you, Sierra. And thank you, April, for having Melissa and I here today. It's really a pleasure to be speaking with everybody about how you can build upon existing engagement of young people on your SILCs and at your centers and in any other space where youth voice might be advantageous. So today we're going to go over a number of topics that we think might be useful for everybody. We're going to basically discuss how you build youth voice into all aspects of the operation, whether that's the Independent Living Council or the center. We're going to go over, just some basic things to be aware of when working with young people. We're going to talk about how do you create an atmosphere where intergenerational partnerships become the norm. We're going to discuss recruitment methods, how to prepare young leaders to be effective on boards and committees, and then ongoing leadership development. And I think depending on where this conversation goes, a lot more topics will also come up. After this presentation, I think there are materials that will be sent out that that Melissa and I will be referencing. So stay tuned for that as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Melissa now to speak a little bit about some of the work she's been doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Zach. Hi, everyone. This is Melissa Ann Santora. I am presently the Director of Innovation at the Arizona Statewide Independent Living Council, where I've been for almost 5 years. And for the last year or so, I have been kind of doing a tandem role as the founding executive director of Diversibility Incorporated, and we'll talk a little bit more about how that all manifested throughout our conversation today. I am a social worker, and I have been working in the field of social work for almost 30 years, which is so hard to believe because I'm only 35. That joke is getting so old. Anywho. Yes, so it's been a long time. Most of my career has been spent working with people who have disabilities in a variety of capacities. I am a person who has a disability. I have raised children who have disabilities, and it's a big part of my life and something that I'm very proud that I get to do. So as the Statewide Independent Living Council, I am responsible for our youth initiatives, which include Arizona Youth Leadership Forum, Arizona Youth Engagement Academy, and their joint alumni associations. So there is our beautiful little logo for our Youth Leadership Forum, and I'll tell you a little bit more about the Youth Leadership Forum. So this is a youth leadership forum that is based on the California model of youth leadership forums that have been around for, I think it's 26 years now. We do a 6-day conference. This year we're actually doing 2 conferences, one in Phoenix where we have been having a conference for the past 5 years, and this year we're adding Flagstaff, which is in northern Arizona, to the mix. So it's the season. Our first Youth Leadership Forum is just about 2 weeks away, so having a little break to talk about some of this stuff is really great for me right about now. So really what Youth Leadership Forums are all about, for those of you who may not know, is helping young people gain skills and perspective through a process of self-discovery to help them as they transition into adulthood. The Youth Leadership Forums throughout the country look similar, and then they all have their own unique and individual spin. We are one of the rare youth leadership forums that has a little bit of an older young adult. Some youth leadership forums are only for high school students. Our definition of youth is under 30, so although we've never had anybody super high, up there close to 30. We have had some 26 and 27-year-olds who have benefited from what we do. So if you don't have a youth leadership forum in your state and you want to learn more, please reach out to me. I'd be more than happy to share some more information about youth leadership forums with you. So we have an alumni association, which we started in 2015, and that was just the year after our original youth leadership forum. And the reason we did that is it became so crystal clear that we had just brought these young people from across our state who have a variety of disabilities from different backgrounds, cultures, regions, you know, all of that sort of stuff, and gave them this experience that made them feel like they could go out there and be the leaders in their own lives and maybe even leaders in other ways. And they went back home and there was nothing really there for them. So prior to having our youth leadership forum in Arizona, excuse me, in independent living, there wasn't a whole lot going on with youth. And so even our Centers for Independent Living didn't have, you know, regular ongoing classes or groups or anything to offer young people. So we couldn't really even plug them into our own system, which was difficult, but you have to start somewhere, and we felt like this was a great place to start. And as it turns out, you know, we were right, and now the centers absolutely have more available, more to offer, and want to do more, which is what's really exciting. I kind of had the mentality, if you build it, they will come, and it's been true, and I'm delighted to say that that's the case. Back to the Alumni Association, though, it's been a critical component, and what we've done is we've given the alumni the opportunity to give back, to serve as ambassadors, to go to outreach, you know, conferences and opportunities to be able to speak about the Youth Leadership Forum. They've spoken a little bit on even a national scale, which has been really exciting. They are, so I'm just going to say it aloud, thus far, our governor has not appointed any of the youth we have advanced to serve on our SILC. So we've had to figure out other ways to get the youth voice into what we're doing at the Arizona SILC. And so we have really created a lot of opportunities for the youth to participate in activities that will inform our state plan and also inform our community, the disability community. So they serve on a variety of committees, task forces, boards, and they provide training and peer-to-peer training at a lot of in a lot of different areas, which is really exciting, and it's such a dynamic process, and that's what keeps me 35, I think. One of the greatest things that our Alumni Association does, and it's set up similarly to a board. They use Robert's Rules of Order. They, you know, have elected officers, all of that sort of thing. So they are making a lot of the decisions about what happens at our Youth Leadership Forum and with the Alumni Association. They drive the goals and the plans. They give a lot of input into, you know, any new things we want to try to bring into the Youth Leadership Forum. You know, they're always my first go-to, you know, folks to kind of ask questions about what's working, what's not so much. And what's so wonderful is they just say it, you know, and it always leads to the best outcomes. So I'm really thrilled that we were able to implement this and have it actually be part of our state plan that we have an alumni association. One of the great things, too, is that the alumni are also serving as staff members at the Youth Leadership Forum. Last year, we had 15 alumni staff members and 10 elder staff members. So we use the distinction of elders, so that for us is anyone over 30, because these people who were 17 when they came to us are now legit adults. So we use elders to reference those of us who are over 30. So that's a little bit about the Alumni Association. And now I want to tell you about the Youth Engagement Academy, which is one of the newer aspects of what we do and is also written into our state plan for independent living. And so it's a more intensive training experience, and it's really a capacity building tool for us to help youth who have gone through our Youth Leadership Forum take on some additional leadership responsibilities and roles. And I referenced earlier that they're doing a lot of peer-to-peer mentoring, training, and support. And it's really been incredible. We've spent the last several months going all across the state of Arizona, doing a couple of different trainings. And we've been working with middle school youth on self-determination and self-advocacy, and all I am is the driver. They do it all. It's really incredible, and these are young people who are between 17 and 26. So it's a variety of ages and life experiences. They come from different parts of Arizona, some very rural, some right in the center of Phoenix, and it's just such an incredible mix. And I just, I'm working my way out of a job, and I'm so happy that I can say that. It's just fantastic. So currently, Arizona Youth Engagement Academy and our Youth Leadership Forum is administered by the Statewide Independent Living Council, but by the end of our next state plan cycle, both of the projects will become the responsibility of Diversibility Incorporated, which is a nonprofit organization run by and for people who have disabilities and other diversities. And so that's what I've been wearing both hats here for the last year, a little more than a year now, running the new nonprofit Diversibility Incorporated and still working at the SILC. So it's been very exciting. And I think what is so cool about what we've done is that everything that I've just told you is written into our state plan. So as we've kind of looked at, trying to create a streamlined process to get to the, get the growth that we're trying to see. And a lot of people are like, so why are you moving this out of the SILC? But it's why we're moving it out of the SILC is if at some point youth are not prioritized in our state plan, we don't want to lose all the ground that we've gained. We don't want to all of a sudden say, oh, well, youth, everything's going so well with youth now in Arizona, nobody thinks we need to do anything, special with it, and then we're just stuck without, any net to be able to continue providing these really critical services. So the other thing that's really awesome about having it be a independent nonprofit is that we can also open up some of what we're doing to a more diverse audience. So our hope is with Diversibility Incorporated at some point to be able to do more inclusive projects that will kind of equalize disability. I don't know about you all and where you are, but here in Arizona, there's all sorts of diversity, and it's all recognized, but disability really isn't considered a diversity here. And, you know, it's like there's all, you know, we can all name out all these different types of diversity, and nobody even brings up people who have disabilities. So that's an education point that we're doing our best to address, but we feel like, you know, we would be able to better address that outside of the SILC going forward. So it's really been a terrific journey. Like I said, we're 5 years for our Youth Leadership Forum, and this year we're having 2, so the growth has been great. Just really, I say that, you know, it's the most wonderful time of the year, Youth Leadership Forum season for me, and I feel like, you know, I'm on a beach in Hawaii, or I'm going to Disneyland, or for me it's Africa. You know, it's like my vacation. It's the most work I do all year, but I feel like I'm on vacation because it just is so renewing, and it's awesome. So I hope you all get a chance somehow, some way to experience the Youth Leadership Forum, because it changes your life. Okay, so that's me. I'm going to send it back over to Zach.
All right, thank you, Melissa. It's always so cool to hear what Melissa is up to, and all the really awesome work that's going on with her and the young people who she works with in Arizona. So I'm Zach Garafalo, and I'm the vice chair of the New York State Independent Living Council, and I grew up in the youth movement. At this point, I'm, I guess, a veteran of it, and my day job is running our Money Follows the Person program for our state association. But I'm a peer, and yeah, so and I worked for this organization called Youth Power prior to joining the New York Association on Independent Living. And Youth Power is the New York State network of young people who have been labeled and are seeking change. And through peer-to-peer mentoring, Youth Power empowers young people to be active citizens who are aware of government operations, their rights, and the ability to use their voices to influence policies, practices, regulation, and law. And it was through Youth Power, you know, that at that point in my life, I was just looking for a job. I was right out of college, and, you know, I have ADHD, and I saw this, you know, position for a Youth Power coordinator job. Youth Power at that point was a very small, you know, 2 or 3 person operation. And then basically we built Youth Power into a statewide advocacy organization for young people with disabilities and systems experience. And part of that included working with the state and with municipalities to build youth voice into their policy practices so that services could be targeted specifically toward people with disabilities and their loved ones. Then I kind of moved on. You know, I like to say I had to retire and, you know, go get a real job. And so now I'm here at the New York Association on Independent Living, but I still get to work with young people through our State Independent Living Council, kind of as a mentor to our youth leadership group. So I apologize in advance for any potential technical issues we run into, but I'd like to try and play a video that talks about the role that young people can play, you know, on SILCs and just more broadly in influencing policies and practices. So let's see if this thing works real quick. Are people seeing anything on their screens? Okay. I can't really, this is the first time I've really used this platform. So in the follow-up, we have a couple videos throughout this presentation. So in the follow-up, these will be sent out. But check out this video. I think it's pretty neat. It just in a minute or two sums up, how to get young people involved. Obviously as a precursor to all the stuff that we're going to be talking about today. So, are there any questions thus far?
And remember, everybody, you can press *# to enter the queue. And if you have accidentally pressed it, you can press it again, and it will take you out of the queue. And you can also ask some questions to the chat. Zach, did you want to watch that video while people are entering their questions?
Yeah, I mean, if we're able to launch it, I just tried really quick on my end. If you're able to launch it, that would be excellent.
Okay, great. Well, and like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and enter those in the chat box now or comment. And then also you can press *# if you're calling, if you'd like to ask your question by phone. And then also remember the person at the top. Many ways to answer questions here. So I will try, and then we will go to questions. All right, was everybody able to see part of that video? I see one question that has come in. If you were able to see it, just let me know. Can I go ahead and open it up to the caller that's in the queue? Hey, go ahead, your line has been unmuted. 252 is the area code. Do you have a question? All right, we're just going to go ahead and go on to the next slide. So, Zach and Melissa, go ahead.
Okay. So the Institute for Educational Leadership put out this publication called The Guideposts to Success. This is through the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, which is funded by, in part, the Office of Disability Employment Policy. And basically, what it found, I think, which is pretty obvious, that for all young people, and particularly young people with disabilities and other systems experience, mentoring is incredibly important. That goes for the employment context, that goes for their own personal social development, creating connectedness to their communities. And I'm sharing this because I think it's a really great resource for people. So if you're not aware of it, then this is something that we're going to send out after the call. But basically, in the context of SILCs and SIL boards, and even just throughout the sectors, creating opportunities where young people can connect with adults who are similar to them is really profound. And if you can provide structured opportunities for them to work on some kind of skill development, that can be mentoring them to be active and effective participants on the SILC. That can be, career development, maybe job shadowing, just creating that connectedness to an older an older person with similar experiences is very meaningful in a young person's development. It also provides an overview of disability history, disability policy, and how young people can use their own lived experience to contribute to the broader dialogue around disability rights and independent living. So definitely check out the Guideposts to Success. So now we're going to jump into trying to come up with a definition of youth engagement. And so I apologize for the formatting on the slides. Definitely please refer to the materials that were sent prior, but I'll just read really quickly the different words on the screen because they kind of at the end of the day all mean the same thing. Youth involvement, youth leadership, youth engagement, youth partnership, youth development, youth driven, youth guided, youth run, youth voice, youth advisory. And so what's, I think, key in all of these words is that we as older adults, as people who run programs or run SILCs or SILs, we need to see the value that young people bring to the table, respect their voice, and treat them as equal partners in creating systemic change at all levels, at the individual level, at the local or regional level, and also at the national level. Adults, to support this, can provide safe and caring environments, serve as mentors and role models. Older people have access to resources that young people do not. Adults also, have a wisdom. Again, that's where this intergenerational mentoring, these intergenerational connections are really important, because ultimately at the end of the day, a youth-driven council does not mean that young people are going to take over the council. It means that everybody is going to come together and the voices and experiences of everybody involved are going to be accepted. Also, kind of switching gears a little bit, so as Melissa kind of referenced, I think you guys go up to 30, right, for the Youth Leadership Forum? So
You can hear me.
What was
Sorry,
that?
everyone. I'm here now. I was sneezing, so we silenced my microphone, but now I'm back, so it's all good. Yes, we go up to 30.
Yeah. So I mean, youth means like, you have the legal definition, which in most cases is 18 is the age of majority. And then, our different service systems have different ages where youth services end. Like in New York, for example, the State Office of Mental Health will provide services up to youth transition services at least. Between the ages of 16 and 26, you can qualify for certain things. Foster care is another age. So, I'm not saying anything new. But young people or youth has all different meanings, given what service system you're dealing with. In New York State, for example, our Youth Leadership Committee goes up to the age of 28, so it's like 14 to 28. All right. So obviously it makes sense on multiple levels for young people to be engaged in policy development and service design. Later in this, we're going to be talking about like what New York has done to build youth voice, some of the stuff that Melissa has done, and how you can translate the experiences of young people into concrete solutions, such as building things into the state plan. In New York, for example, we have funding specifically for youth leadership development. We specifically recruit young people to be appointed to the council. Arizona has some similar and some other practices as well, and so we'll continue to talk about and share resources that can help people do that. Basically, nothing about us without us. It's a mantra pretty much everywhere, and that goes for the youth movement and for youth voice as well. I want to read a really, I think, meaningful quote to people, and it goes like this. And this came out of a thing that was done in terms of surveying youth engagement across the state of New York. It was done by this organization called Act for Youth. If you had a problem in the black community and you brought in a group of white people to discuss how to solve it, almost nobody would take that panel seriously. In fact, there'd probably be a public outcry. It would be the same thing for women's issues or gay issues. But every day in local arenas, all the way to the White House, adults sit around and decide what problems youth have and what youth need without ever consulting us. And someone named Jason said that. And so I think that very succinctly sums up the need for not just young people, but all people who are impacted by specific policies and services to be engaged in actually developing them. So one of the tools that we're going to provide is a couple questionnaires. One that was developed by an organization called Youth on Board, and then another that we kind of put together. But basically, it kind of gets at, like, where does your SILC or where does your SIL or where does your organization stand in terms of its culture of readiness for engaging young people? What's the level of commitment? Is everybody on board? Questions like, has your group thought about why you are involving young people in decision making? Is it just to fill a quota? Is it because everybody really believes in the value that youth voice and engagement will add to the process? Is it somewhere in between that? In between those two extremes? So questions like that. Are these policies, or are these ideas about youth voice articulated anywhere? So, like, is it written into your state plan? Looking at just different attitudinal barriers. Are young people involved in all issues, or just those affecting youth? In New York, what we've done is we've tried to populate all of the committees of the council with young people, and then we match them up with an older, more experienced peer who's on the council to be able to mentor them. So, for example, most recently we had a young member under 28 years old become the chair of the Emergency Preparedness Committee, and so he's going to be working with more seasoned individuals to kind of hone his leadership skills, but also, he'll be able to take a leadership role on that committee. We have another veteran of the youth movement who's in charge of our public policy committee, and he's really been piloting our leadership development and civic engagement program. And so it's basically just been changing the culture of the council over the years to recruit and engage young leaders. And, you know, I think this directly speaks to what these assessments try to get at, you know, to determine, like, where are you guys, and then what can be done to, you know, get you to the next level in terms of, you know, either getting youth appointed to the council or maybe populating some of these committees with young people, you know, with lived experience. Some additional questions are just like, you know, philosophical. Have you recognized the value of having your voice heard? Do you take leadership roles whenever possible? Do you share your thoughts even when you're not comfortable? This evaluation, you know, kind of prods you to think, like, is there an orientation system in place? So we have a new member orientation that everybody goes through. And then specifically for young people, we do an additional thing where we meet the night before of each meeting to make sure that everybody is, you know, up to speed. And we also have calls, you know, in between, but really making sure that people are prepped. So again, it's like trying to infuse all these different principles and being mindful so that everybody is involved in the decision-making process.
Jack, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
So this is Melissa, and one of the things that I was just thinking of as we were going over this slide is that when you get really good at infusing the youth into the culture of your SILC is when the youth are also ready to then, you know, get active in other aspects. So while I mentioned earlier that we don't have anyone who has been appointed to the SILC, we do have lots of youth who serve on a variety of committees for our SILC. But in addition to that, once they've kind of started to figure out what those dynamics are like and, you know, get comfortable in an environment that's, you know, very open to them being there, they have really gone on to be able to contribute to other organizations as well. And so serving on boards and commissions and councils and that sort of thing and committees has been great. And we have a couple of youth who are doing some really awesome statewide work that is, you know, not connected to the SILC, but, you know, partners well, like being on our community of practice on transition. So we have two of our alum who serve there and both serve on committees, and one was really instrumental in the development of a transition slide guide that the community of practice put out last year. So it's been really cool to see that some of these other agencies are now tapping into the youth that we've kind of supported and cultivated to, you know they have a voice and not be afraid to use it. And, you know, giving them opportunities to get training that's, you know, not connected to us in any way, to go and to share their voice, you know, with nationwide projects. And one young lady in particular was the only young person to go to this particular kind of think tank, really. And it was so remarkable and so empowering for her to be able to come back and say, not only did I know what I was talking about, I wasn't afraid to talk about it, and people listened to me. Very cool.
That's awesome. So this is a neat little image for basically figuring out where you might be in terms of youth engagement. So we have, and it's an upside down triangle with youth as clients at the bottom. Youth are served by adults and have no input into program decision making. Then there's like youth participation, and then there's youth involvement. And then we get to like this thing where it's youth driven, where young people have meaningful roles in the overall operational governance. Youth led, and then youth run. And it's a really cool, just a neat little graphic that gets you to think about where you are. And once you figure out where you are and determine where you want to get to, there are all sorts of benefits for, multiple groups of people. Benefits for young people, helps them develop their leadership skills and knowledge. Unfortunately, our society all too often sees a disability as a deficit. Here they can use that disability as an asset and use it to change or influence policy. Building in youth leadership helps young people develop confidence, strengthen their sense of pride and self-worth, and have their voices heard. There are benefits for adults. It helps adults view young people as legitimate contributors to the decision-making process and become more effective and confident in their work with youth and the work of youth. Often there's like this nervousness, that comes, that I think sometimes at the beginning comes when you integrate young people into boards and committees. And again, as it develops, it becomes more natural. There are benefits for the families of young people who are engaged in SILCs and other boards and committees. They might have, for the majority of that individual's life, not seen this positive, this other side to them. And many of the young people who we target, and I think this also might be true for Melissa, people, with non-traditional experiences. They might not necessarily be the strongest in school or, be in all the clubs and all that kind of stuff. But they're real leaders. And this is a real way to cultivate and help them develop that leadership with caring adults. And I think that's a huge benefit, for families to be able to see that nurtured and developed. Obviously, there are organizational benefits. You can better meet the needs of young people across the state. What we've been able to do here is through the Independent Living Council is we've been able to network all of the youth-serving professionals at the different independent living centers together so that they have their own, professional network, and they can share strategies that have worked for them and just bounce ideas off of each other. It's good to have that network available. Obviously, embedding outreach to young people and priorities that affect young people, particularly marginalized, multi-disabled and multi-marginalized communities into the spill. So making sure we have a real focus on that. Then there are the benefits for planners and policymakers. Hearing young people as active, speaking up at our SILC meetings is really cool. We have, just like everybody else probably for their SILCs, you have your DSE, the designated state entity, or DSU, whatever the current acronym is. We have other state people who come, and they're able to see young people who are informed and active participants in these discussions, and I think that's really valuable. Benefit, and then obviously benefits to the community. So it's building in youth voice has many different benefits. Melissa, did you want to add anything to that?
No, that sounded perfect.
Okay. So obviously, building youth voice cannot be successful without the partnership of adults and more seasoned council members. Building these relationships is essential. Oftentimes, it's a mentoring relationship. Like when I first got onto our council, I don't know, I was probably like 25 or something, and I didn't really know anybody. I sort of knew, I knew the broad disability issues, but I wasn't incredibly familiar with the intricacies of independent living at that point. And, I was personally fortunate to be able to develop relationships immediately with the people on the council, and work very closely with our director, Brad Williams. And, as we kind of got additional young people onto the council, we were able to create these opportunities for, the young adults to connect with center directors, with people from, various constituencies that make up the council. I will say in New York, we don't. It's not a governor appointment. It's through our board of regents. So we've been fortunate that basically we do our own interviews, and then we submit a list to the board of regents of people who we believe would be good council members. And that's basically the appointment process. So that's, I think, one of the reasons why we've been successful in getting a number of young people appointed to this, because we don't have that barrier of the governor's office. Let's see. I reference those guideposts, the guideposts to success again, because mentoring is so incredibly valuable. Having somebody who knows about it and that person can turn to is very important. Also, when young people come on, they tend to kind of, all cluster together. And so that's, it's good, and hopefully over time they'll continue to kind of spread out in the room. I'm talking physically, sit close together. But that's a good thing, because they're able to, I guess maybe ask each other questions, or, provide that mutual support if this is the first time they've been in that kind of big setting. So having a couple young people working together to mentor one another, and then also those intergenerational partnerships with, with our executive director and other council members. Youth Voice is really built right into the framework of SILC, and I think that's really helped propel us in terms of filling the board with young adults with emerging leaders. So this is definitely stuff that you're going to want to think about, is how do you make meetings accessible to youth? And the first thing that I would do, and this is regardless of what you're talking about. This is just basic If you want to get young people to something, these are things that you should that you should think about when you schedule a meeting. Sometimes young people are in school or they have employment obligations, or and oftentimes they're not as financially secure as adults who are either paid to attend the meetings or have that flexibility to miss a day of work. Our calls are in, like the youth calls are in the evening when young people can join them. And then basically if you're on a committee, it's at the whim of the committee. But we've been getting pretty good attendance for them. Providing information. Obviously information by law needs to be provided for council members, for the full council meeting well in advance of the meeting. But providing it in an accessible format that young people can read, whether it's electronically or large print. And I know I'm preaching to the choir with this, accessibility, but just stuff to think about. Time to kind of brief and debrief before and after the meetings. That support during the meeting, whether you're sitting next to an older council, like an older council member, or, it's a cluster of young people who can, I guess, ask each other questions. Also letting young people know, because going into these meetings, you're not going to know, if you haven't been on a committee before, and that's the majority of the young people on just councils in general, is the protocol, can you leave to go use a restroom, or can you stand up and walk around if you want to? We have people on our council who will just get up and pace the room just because that's how they are. Because it's, who wants to sit still for that amount of time? But letting them know, the expectations of everybody that, yeah, you can go to the bathroom or do what you need to do during meetings, so that they understand and you can get those procedural things out of the way. Depending on how closely you follow Robert's Rules of Order or some other parliamentary procedure, doing a quick orientation on that. We had at one meeting this, we had a new person and we didn't orient this person well enough. And so he had no idea about how parliamentary procedure worked. And we don't strictly follow it, but we use the basic stuff. He had no idea what that was, and that was my fault. But he was called out of order and all that stuff. It was actually a pretty interesting meeting. But yeah, making sure that they have all of that knowledge going into it and then know how to apply it. Thinking about transportation. If you're able to pay stipends or incentives, in New York, what we're able to do is we can, if a young person wants to go to some, leadership development activity, we're able to support that. There's a process they go through. It gets approved, or if you've been involved for, a while, it's going to be approved. It's pretty cool. That's one way that we're able to send people to Nickel and to other leadership development opportunities. Again, having those debriefs and what are the next steps. So that might be, okay, we're going to have a call in 2 weeks to discuss this. And then just, recognition of contributions. Letting young people know that what they're providing is meaningful. And obviously everybody brings a certain personality to the council. And I think that, and some people are going to be way more forceful, or, they might try to shut people down immediately depending on, the particular politics of that council. But I think just being mindful that these, young people have never, or maybe have had very little experience with this type of thing. And so don't be as aggressive as you might be with somebody else, and recognize that they're trying to contribute something. And maybe they're really nervous contributing it. And if you shut them down immediately, they're not going to want to add anything else. So trying to find the value in what they add. I guess just being cognizant of all of that stuff. Melissa, do you want to, is there anything else that maybe we should add to this?
No, I think that, I just was thinking, that I'm doing the checklist as we're going through those and thinking, yeah, we're doing all those things. So, it's super important. I think the only other thing that I would say is, when you're talking about roles and expectations, I think that sometimes if you're the person who's supporting a young person, it's really important to frame their competency before they ever show up to the meeting. I have watched others do this in a way that it's almost an apology, and it's almost like humor me to bring this young person. And young people, just like any other people, do not want to be tokens. They want a job to, if you give them something to do, and they know the parameters and the framework and what they're trying to achieve, they will excel. And I feel like I've just been in some situations where it's kind of been, well, let's just try and see. No, this is what we're doing. Let's commit to this. We've already, hopefully we've already done the work, to say we're committing to this. So let's say, this person's got a lot to offer, and we should be excited and, embrace this. So that's all I wanted to say.
Does anybody have any questions about just general youth engagement strategies?
And again, this is Sierra. You can join by phone through the question and answer part by dialing *# or star hashtag. You can also drop in the chat box or raise your hand using the person at the top of your screen by just clicking that. So if you have any questions in regard to youth engagement and ways to really include them and make sure that they're part of what you're doing at this point, go ahead and press *# or open the chat box. Okay, I'm not seeing anything come in. We'll give it one more second. All right, I guess we can keep moving ahead.
Okay, so we kind of talked about this a little bit, but you're going to want to survey and I guess reflect upon, biases that people might unknowingly have about age and ability. We will send out some resources that you guys can use after this. Also, there's a really cool resource that I hadn't included, but I'm just thinking of now. It's something on implicit bias, and if you type in Harvard implicit bias, you will find it. It's like a 5-minute questionnaire, and it identifies, what implicit biases we all carry. It was very interesting when I took it. I had, no idea, and I definitely would recommend people do that. And it goes beyond like age, and ableism type stuff. Try to take a strengths-based approach again. So like if a young person, they're there, they're going to be nervous. Maybe trying to reframe what they say into a way that it fits within the particular conversation, or, basically looking at their strengths rather than their weaknesses. Every young person possesses unique strengths and abilities, and it's our job as older, more seasoned people to try to help them harness those and contribute in whatever meaningful way they can. Again, this will help us all respect the different cultures that each generation brings to the table. There's so much that can be said about young people these days, about older people, just the different generational, the different generational things that people comment on. And the validity of that is definitely up for debate, but just keeping all that stuff in mind. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is help young people carry that torch, because eventually we won't be here, and it's going to be the next generation who will be carrying the torch. This slide's just, an interesting graphic on generalizations that people make about young people, and then it shows what the reality of it might be. So, and this is, an example of like framing things in a strength-based fashion, but they, meaning youth, can't see the long-term consequences of their actions. And a strength-based way of looking at it is being involved will help youth see the consequences of using their voices and creating change. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. This is within the PowerPoint, so you can, read that more fully. So now we're going to go into how you can, what are some concrete and tangible things that you can do immediately and over time as you incorporate youth-guided practices onto your SILC or SIL boards of directors. So this can include everything from, just calling up one of your centers and asking, hey, do you have a young person, or do you have two young people who might be interested in coming to our upcoming meeting? Or, if you're talking about the state plan, ensuring that young people are aware that, you might be holding hearings and that their voices matter and that you'd like them to be involved. As it kind of moves, as building youth voice kind of moves forward, again, infusing young people onto the different committees, maybe involving them in the hiring decision, getting them to serve whether as, official members of the SILC or ex officio members on the different committees of the council. Utilize their expertise wherever possible. These days, like this upcoming generation and technology, like it's amazing. And you might be able to, if you haven't already, And if funding's available, that's great, but maybe create an internship opportunity, and they might be able to help out with some of your online marketing or your social media presence. You know, everybody's spread really thin, and if there's an opportunity to, you know, engage a young person where they can meaningfully use their skills, that's, you know, that's really important. If you can pay them, that's awesome. You know, that's even better. Setting up a youth advisory council, or, you know, a youth committee on the SPIL. I mean, not the SPIL, on the SILC. That's also, you know, also another way that you can do it from the very beginning. Working with young people on the onboarding process. So these are, I guess, some concrete ways that from the very beginning you can start to infuse youth voice into the SILC. I want to go back to your new member orientation. So definitely think about that, how it's currently done, and what might be able to be done in the future if it doesn't already include ways to orient young people. So think about, you know, those procedural things, parliamentary procedure, you know, the way the board operates, how you get there, like the transportation logistics, things that might seem cut and dry to, you know, to most people, but sometimes it's good to spell it out. Obviously, an overview of you know, the federal regulations and how the SILC operates, you know, that's important, but you know, I think a more in-depth explanation of what their roles and expectations are is good. And if you already have somebody who can lead that, a young person who can lead that, that's excellent. And then if you're going to have then create, you know, an evaluation process so they can give some feedback on what you did, and then maybe incorporate the feedback into revisions to the orientation in the future. I think recruitment materials, regardless of board or, you know, center, that's important, and if you can engage youth in creating them, that's excellent. Melissa, do you have anything that you know, for Arizona that young people have done for the Youth Leadership Forum?
Yeah, they do a lot of the social media stuff, and at least a lot of the like flyers and things that we end up putting up. They do a lot of the photography and that sort of thing, which is really nice as well. And more than recruitment materials, they're actually developing the training materials now. So we've kind of shifted our focus to having them take a much more hands-on approach to designing as well as implementing the peer-to-peer, you know, trainings that we're doing. So we're lucky at our SILC that we have employed a young person who does much of the social media and website design and all of that jazz, all of the outreach for the SILC. So our alum have kind of transitioned over to, you know, doing it for Diversibility Incorporated. So that's kind of how, what we're seeing our shift to be.
Nice. once young people are at the table, just kind of like you might do within any organization, is develop a strategic plan. And, obviously it would be, for this, how do you increase meaningful and authentic youth engagement on your SILC? And maybe within the broader independent living community. So definitely think of that. In New York, we came up with 3 different goals, and this was youth driven, and that's basically guided the implementation. So the goals that we came up with were engage young people in the independent living movement in a meaningful way. The second was assist independent living centers increase their capacity to serve youth and young adults and strengthen their outreach efforts. And build and sustain youth involvement in the independent living network. And then strategic planning, you break it all down into different, measurable objectives. So for the first goal, develop marketing and outreach materials. And then how do they do that? The next objective develop, an active youth leadership committee and ensure voting youth members of SILC. And this is something that we can send out after this that might be, just a starting point for folks if they're interested. So that'll be sent out after this. And I think, Melissa, for your programs, I'm sure young people are leading the charge for that.
Yeah, for
Definitely.
sure.
So earlier, I think making sure young people have the skills that they need to be effective on not only the SILC, but in their life. That's something that SILC supports. And so we have funding available, and this was, we wrote this into the state plan to be able to send young people to various leadership development opportunities. There's a video in the PowerPoint that basically provides an overview of what this is. It's called the Pat Figueroa Scholarship. Many of you have probably heard of Pat Figueroa, but this provides funding for young people to be able to attend different training opportunities. As I said before, people have gone to Nickel with it. People have used it to go to Washington to advocate for other policies. People have used it to fund advocacy trips to Albany. Somebody had a specific disability and there was a specific conference pertaining to that disability, and so that individual used this to go to that and build a network of supports within that specific disability community. It's very broad, again, and it's individualized. So whatever a young person thinks is going to be beneficial to their own personal development, that's something that our council is able to support, and it's pretty cool.
And Zach, if I could jump in and say that part of our Youth Engagement Academy, which is written into the state plan and there are funds attached to it, is that we are able to do something similar. So that's how our youth are attending April and Nickel and other types of conferences, as well as earlier I talked about them creating curricula and that sort of thing. We're also able able to provide a stipend to them for some of the services that they're providing for us. So we're really excited that we're able to kind of, thank them in a real, in a monetary way for everything that they have been giving back to us for free. It's really, they're to the point now where they're graduating from college. Some of them are married and having children and all of those sorts of things, and it's like they just don't have as much time to be able to dedicate to the cause because real life happens, of course, and this isn't their job unless we can make it their job on a small scale, which is what a big part of what we're doing.
Yeah. So it's, I think it's once this becomes built in to, into the council, I think that's a really good step in terms of engaging young people. When you see this translate into policies and programs, you are definitely on the right track. All right. So does anybody have any questions? I know the time's kind of drawing near. Does anybody have questions about, what we've just talked about?
And remember, if you have a question or have a comment that you would like to make, you can press *# on your phone, or you can press the person at the top of the screen with their hand raised, or drop it into the chat box. *#. While we're waiting for some of those questions to come in, I would like to encourage you to also just think where you're at with your SILC and where Melissa and Zach are, which are kind of a lot of our goals to where we want to be. But what are some of the things that you're facing as barriers that maybe you can use those brains on the phone right now to kind of answer those and help jump some of those barriers and break through them to get more youth involved on your SILC, or, like I said, in your center, on your boards and councils in your community. I'm not seeing any questions or anything come in now. What I am going to do is go ahead and open the line. We are going to ask you just a couple of questions, and then if you want to jump in that way, that might be the easiest thing for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute line.
You have been muted. Your microphone has been turned on.
What we encourage you to do is just really share with us where you're at. We like to know, what successes you're having that maybe you're doing that weren't mentioned here, and how you're infusing youth into the culture of your SILC. Would anybody like to share that? Locked up tight. Great. Well, without any other questions or comments, I wanted to go ahead and share the resources. Zach and Melissa, did you have anything you wanted to add to the resources that are listed here?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just that Harvard implicit bias thing, but I can email it to you, or I can try to find it and put it in that chat box.
Yeah, I tried to do that. Hopefully that's the right link. I think that's the one that you've sent me to before. So, and it is a really good self-awareness tool to use.
Oh, cool. I'm just seeing this now. I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah. And so we thank you all for joining us. I do just want to remind you that this is a series of calls So we ask you to save the date. The next calls that will be coming up are August 1st, IEP advocacy. And then in October, we will have disability history and how do you really talk about that with young people. And then in December, the LGBTQIA+ community. And how do you engage them into what you are doing within IL? And are they a complete portion of what you're working with and working towards? So we thank you for joining us for this call. We wanted to make sure that we had the opportunity for SILC to have some time to talk about what they're working towards. And then, again, if you have any questions about peer-to-peer mentoring and what that maybe looks like, I know some people are just starting at the beginning. And before we jump off, Melissa and Zach, what are just two, as Mary always says, nugget of wisdom that maybe you could share with some of the people on their call that are just starting out and saying, I want young people? What are two things that you would suggest them start with?
So tap into maybe your existing center networks, but also maybe more broadly, other disability or social justice organizations. And then also look for, the non-traditional leader, the person who might not always have those leadership opportunities. I think that there's a lot of untapped wisdom and untapped potential that might be able to be harnessed.
Yeah, that's kind of the road I was going down to. I would say never limit anyone's potential, and just think outside the box in terms of where you can get support, who you can partner with, what are some other successful youth organizations that have, youth experiencing meaningful roles in their organizations that you can tap into for mentorship and partnership.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for taking the time out and working towards this and sharing what you're doing in Arizona and New York. You all are doing such great work. I have dropped in the evaluation for today's call. Your feedback helps us improve. We welcome that and encourage that, so please take some time to let us know how we're doing and how we can get better. We also, please be on the lookout. We are going to be sending you the audio recording for today, the transcript, all the attachments that Zach was referencing, along with those videos that, those technology pieces that don't like me more so. And so please note that those will all be coming up, so you'll have lots of material to review as well. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope you will join us in August. Thank you again, Melissa and Zach.
Thank you.